Well, it feels very wintry at the minute still. Very wintry morning here. So yeah, hope you guys are doing fantastic and enjoying the season as well. It's definitely my favourite time of year. Now, look, I want to start off just a very brief sort of ground rules. I appreciate there's still some people joining. I've got a couple of screens up so I can see everything that's going on. I have taken the chats off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my email address with you guys because I think that might be the easiest way for me to give you everything you need without sort of having to go through or sort of answering everybody's questions as much as I can. It's difficult for me to read all the chats and then sort of consider your answer and then sort of hand it back out at the same time. So what I want to do, let me just add the slide deck on for you here. Now, I've prepared, hopefully you can all see that okay. I've prepared some slides just to sort of go through the sort of talking points and make sure I've got everything covered for you. As I mentioned, if you've got any questions, I have taken the chat off. If you could drop me an email, in fact, here's my email address. You can email it over to alex@linemarking.expert. What I'll do is I can then consider your question and then come up with the response that you need that will help you in the best possible way. Sorry, just turn that off. In the best possible way to sort of answer your questions and anything else that you might sort of get throughout the session. So if you could drop me an email, that'd be fantastic, and I'll answer it. And I'll try and send the responses to everybody in the group as well afterwards, so that I can answer anything you might need. So first up, I just wanted to address who is this for. So the masterclass. In fact, I'm going to ask. I'm just going to do a quick poll. I've actually put together. Let me just add this here. So this is a quick poll that I put together on have you tried line marking before? And really what I'm looking to find out is what people's experiences are. So yeah, a couple of mixed sort of answers. Yeah, people have done it, not done it. Now, I would say that the key thing I think with the session today is I get broadly two sort of types of people really. Those that have got some minor experience or they've got some experience either way doing line marking, the installation side. So either worked for somebody else doing the installation or perhaps worked in a company that where you've come across, whether you're doing sales of paints, etc., or related industry, perhaps field markings, landscaping, that sort of thing, and those that haven't done line marking at all. And I would say more of the people that I work with have actually had some experience with line marking. And a lot of the people, yeah, they sort of got minor experience, but a lot of them still don't. This is a brand new sort of venture for them looking into line marking. So if that's you, if you fall into either of those sort of two categories, then this is the course for you. So anyway, I thought I'd give you a quick overview of how we got to where we are right now, and then we're going to move on through the rest of the session, nice and brief. I originally got involved in line marking around 9 years ago initially, so I've got emails coming through. Yeah, it's about 9 years ago all in now, and I started a facilities management company, which essentially meant we did electrical and mechanical work. That was my background. That expanded into grounds maintenance, which you can see here. This is actually one of our batwing mowers that we're doing school line markings and field markings. And of course, that led on to here. So this is actually, you can't quite see it in the image. This is what's known as a Maca, Fleet Maca. It's a GPS guided line marking machine specifically for field line marking. And honestly, I don't think they were that great, but that's where I got started. So it started all into field line markings, etc. And it wasn't absolutely brilliant, if I'm completely honest, to start with. I didn't do an amazing job of it. In fact, I did such a bad job that I decided that I didn't want to be. I mean, I almost lost a school contract of 6 schools because it was that bad. And you can see here, this is supposed to be a laser guided, or at least GPS guided, perfectly straight line. It's got a nice big curve in it. And I think not really down to us as such, the machinery in this case, but a lot of time we did make mistakes. But I decided to double down, and we moved from that into then the car parks. So I figured if I can do grass and field, which if I make a mistake it grows, and cut it off, then I can move on to car parks. And that's what we did. We made that nice transition into parking spaces. This, for example, is an overmark in a doctor's surgery. Now, when I started all this, what then happened was COVID-19. And that was disastrous for my facilities management company. And I was fortunate enough, I had a long time off work, as many people did. I read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. Now, if you've not read it, I'm not going to go through the full ins and outs of the book, but essentially it surmises that there are 2 oceans, a red and a blue. The red ocean is what's saturated. The blue ocean is where you want to be. That's the sort of empty space, if you like. Now, as I mentioned, I trained as an electrician, so we did electrical work, we did mechanical, heating, air conditioning. That expanded into winter gritting, to landscaping, and then a little bit of line marking. Now, I would say in each of those fields, say for example, landscaping, there are probably 100 people. I'm here in Northamptonshire in England. There's probably 100 people in just my local county that do landscaping, and we're all after the same customers because there are only so many offices and warehouses with grounds and so many schools. So we're all after the same customers. In addition, we did electrical work, mechanical work, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, which meant, there's another 100 people in each one of those fields that we were competing with. We were probably competing with 1,000 people just in our local area, trying to win in each segment of the business. And it was absolutely disastrous. I think, we were fighting at the end to win work worth £300 or £400 a day. It was absolutely appalling. And that was, I've still got friends that are involved in, say, electrical work and landscaping work. They can only do £300 or £400 a day, which, I appreciate some of you in North America or Australia. So it's probably, in Australian dollars, probably about $500, $600, $700, $800 maybe tops. In Canada, North America, it's probably about $700, $800 a day. In fact, not even that. I'd say about $600 a day, which might sound okay, but when you're running a business, it's really not that great. And as I say, I've got friends that are still doing it for £300 or £400 pounds a day now. It's quite difficult. And anyway, the book I read, Blue Ocean Strategy, it got me thinking about it. And I thought, well, I'm competing with an awful lot of people for what I felt was an ever shrinking market, because people were coming into the market, because landscaping, electrical work, plumbing, heating, all of those things are sort of mainstream trades, I would say, that people go into as a career. Whereas line marking is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a subset, if you like, but it's lesser known. It's not as talked about. It's not as prominent, and yet it's incredibly niche and profitable in comparison. So coming out of COVID, read the book, and I thought, okay, I'm done with the landscaping, done with the electrical work. I want to make really good money. And I'd set a figure of like a target for me. It was like, I wanted to make 25 grand a month, which again, you'd have to convert to your sort of local currency, but 25,000 a month was my goal. And I thought, there's absolutely no way I can do it unless I've got about 50 staff and £1 million worth of equipment and all these other bits and pieces, marketing and salespeople. I thought it's just going to be impossible. Anyway, reading the Blue Ocean Strategy, I sort of realized, actually, line marking is broadly split into two categories. You've got highway line marking, which is in the UK dominated by 3 companies that own 90%. One of them owns about 80%, 2 of them own sort of 10% between them, and the rest is scattered around. And then off highway, which is very much fragmented, and that's really your sort of 2 categories. And I found that actually the number of companies, when I say I compete with probably 100 landscaping companies and 100 electricians locally for landscaping electrical work, I probably compete with that nationally for line marking. That's how much smaller the competition is. And yet the market is still huge. It's certainly even, we're a small island here in the UK. It's massive, and it's growing considerably as well. So it's one of those things that I think is being really helped by the advent of, say, electric cars, where we're painting in the green EV bays, or with health and safety, it's a lot more about walkways, zebra crossings. With logistics and warehousing, it's about sort of strategy, like 5S strategies and things like that in Kanban. And that really has actually opened up the market to become quite big. And so I decided to start again, and I started with spray line marking. Now, there are 2 different machines here. If you guys are, a little bit familiar with line marking, you'll probably know that the one on the left here, this is a Titan machine. They're both hydraulic machines. You get piston as well. These are both hydraulics. The one on the left, the Titan, I would say is really good for solvents, acrylics, and water-based paints. The one on the right-hand side is what we call an MMA machine. This one's this one's specifically for a 2-component mix in the gun system. Now, MMA is it's something that's been around for a while, but it's certainly becoming more prominent now when people look at longevity of the line markings, and a lot of the time people will talk about environmentally friendliness of the products as well. So solvent based, you could naturally assume, yeah, fine, it's full of solvents, not that great for the environment. MMA actually isn't much better in many cases, to be fair at all. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors about the environmentally friendliness of it. The only way I think it could be more environmentally friendly is perhaps because it lasts longer and you therefore have to travel less, in terms of return or repeat visits. What this machine can do is, though, you can actually spray MMAs out of this if you use a coated glass bead and solvents and acrylics. You can do water-based out of it. Water-based, sorry, water-based is a bit of a funny one. A lot of people talk about water-based being environmentally friendly. In my opinion, it doesn't last anywhere near as long. But actually, if you were to lift the lid on a tin of water-based paint and take a good smell, you will absolutely understand that it's not just water-based paint. There are definitely solvents in there. The difference is we use organic solvents in a water-based paint, and try to palm that off as environmentally friendly. I think a lot of smoke and mirrors in it, to be honest, because it doesn't last anywhere near as long. And as I say, you lift that lid, that's not just water in there. That absolutely stinks. But these are the sort of basic machines. And this is what I started with. Now, the one on the left here, the Titan, you can pick that up for about £8,000, and it's a great way of getting started because you can spray on every single surface. So you can do tarmac, block paving, you can do concrete. In fact, we've even sprayed mats for events and temporary lines as well with it. So really, really good. The one on the right, that's actually about 45 grand. It's a very, very big, heavy machine. I would say massively overkill. Sorry. So you don't need to start with masses and masses of equipment. I think this is partly where I sort of went wrong initially, because I spent about £250,000 starting linemark.com on buying just equipment and massively overspent. And I think it was a bit of an error in that respect. We moved from the car parks though. So the natural progression for us, we did car parks for offices, then obviously warehouses where you've got the loading bays, the yards, etc. The natural progression for that was to move over to the indoor line marking. Now, there is a very big difference between these two types of line marking, indoor and outdoor. I think outdoor is very quick and easy to get involved in. And I honestly, if I were sort of looking to do just one or the other, I'd probably pick the outdoor. The downside, of course, is the weather impact. When it comes to indoor, though, it's a completely different kettle of fish. You've got to be so much more accurate. In fact, I would almost say you've got to be an expert before you even put your first line down. Outdoor line marking is very forgiving. If you make a mistake on concrete or block paving, you can probably grind it off, burn it off, black it out. Same with tarmac. You can sort of black it out maybe. Even hydroblast is an expensive way, but it will fix it. With indoor line marking, because you're abrading that surface and taking the top layer of concrete off, it is far less forgiving. In fact, I would say it's not forgiving in the slightest. You sort of have to get everything perfect every time, because people will notice, if you're walking in a warehouse and there's a slight wobble on the walkway, or something's not straight, or there's a little splatter of paint, I promise you, they will spot that a mile off in a warehouse floor. Whereas outside, you can kind of, I'm not saying be slapdash, but it's forgiving. You can make a mistake, you can rectify it. Indoors, not so much. You've kind of got to be that professional sort of expert level before you even start there. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to touch on, I talked about spray just there, and it's a great way of getting started because you can stencil everything, you can paint on every surface. So if you're doing text or handicap symbols, EV symbols, whatever it might be, really nice and easy to do. One thing that's changed certainly for me is actually using thermoplastic. In fact, I'm gonna just add another poll on, because there's a couple of questions I wanted to have, and really it's what your biggest fear is. So whether it's making the mistakes, etc. So let me just share a quick poll so you guys can have a quick look at that as well. Now, as we're doing that, I'll just talk briefly about the thermoplastic. It's something that I was never overly comfortable with. I bought a lorry that you can see in the background. I bought that about 1.5 years ago, and it sat there for about a year. And last 6 months, I'd say I've been using it almost daily. Now, the reason I've been using it daily isn't because I think it's necessarily better. I think there's a lot of misperception about it being less environmentally friendly, but actually it's made from a tree sap. Arguably, you've got a diesel engine running and some gas burners, with the propane running, but it does a very, very good job and it lasts a very long time. One of the benefits I've found, though, from doing thermoplastic, moving not away from spray, but trying to move more in this direction, is actually because of the feedback I've had from customers. You see, when we do, I said that indoor line marking isn't forgiving in the slightest, whereas outdoors spray is quite forgiving. When you compare the two, outdoors is definitely more forgiving, but outdoors you've got two products. You've got spray applied, you've got thermoplastic. Out of the two of those, there is the same disparities you have between indoors and outdoors, because if you're spray applying line markings, you're going to end up with like a really sharp edge, really defined. It looks amazing. And while that's sort of the standard we want for every single job, the reality is if you make a slight wobble in the line, if you've dropped some paint, if it drips, even the spray tip drips ever so slightly with paint, because everything's so razor sharp, it stands out a country mile. People can spot it a mile off and go, not happy with that, I need you back in to do it. The other thing you get, of course, is like a feathery sort of effect sometimes, where it's sort of like powdery on the edges, and you need to resharpen things up when your spray tips start to wear out. Alternatively, if it's windy, you can actually get the spray sort of blowing off a little bit and causing sort of paint specks and flecks elsewhere. So one of the things we found with thermoplastic is actually we met the client expectation to a higher degree by offering it, and it didn't make sense to me, right? Because spray line marking is sharper, it's finer, it's more defined. When I go to thermoplastic, it's less defined. It's got like a rough sort of bobbly, fuzzy sort of edge to it, and yet that's kind of what the clients expect in many sort of cases. And so actually moving to a thermoplastic served a few benefits for us. The client got a faster return to service because the area, as soon as we put the paints on the ground, within 2 or 3 minutes, it's ready to drive over. So very, very fast return to service. But they also got the anticipation of that's what it would look like. Whereas when we did spray, it was like, oh, okay, is that the stat? Will it last as long? Because we can't see a lorry doing it. It looks less heavy duty. And so our expectation is because the machinery looks less heavy duty, maybe the paint's less heavy duty, therefore it doesn't last as long and we put less value on it. That's not necessarily the case. I think spray applicable MMA will outlast it, but that's sort of the client perception we had. And so the feedback we got moving to a thermo has actually helped massively. Now, there are some caveats to it, of course. I've never been a big fan because I don't like hot works necessarily. And not only that, running a lorry is so much more expensive than, say, one of our vans. They're so much bigger, use loads more fuel. But also, even just, in a van, I can turn up with the spray machine in the back of the van. Within 10 minutes, I can have the whole car park sprayed and I'm on to the next job. With a lorry, I've got half an hour of just setting up, just heating the paints up and then pouring the paint, the sort of powder bags in, mixing them and, and everything else. And it's quite time consuming in the setup stage and expensive to operate. And so when you're starting line marking, I wouldn't say that it's worth jumping straight into thermoplastic. I would start 100% with either a hand mold system if I want to start on a budget, move to a spray system if I've got a bigger budget, and then a thermoplastic again if my budget stretches to that, depending on my client expectations and of course where you are in the world. Here in the UK, thermoplastic is the standard that people anticipate and expect. Elsewhere, for example, I know in America, a lot of yours is actually spray applicable. That's the standard they expect there. And so you might go, actually, there's no big need for this. Unless you're doing main roads and junctions, we're going to stick with spray. That's totally cool. You need to understand who your customer is and what their anticipation of the finish is to sort of really decide which is best. But that's how I've found, that's essentially what I found as I've been going through what's worked best and what hasn't. I'm going to just give you a quick handout here on paints and uses, because one of the things I think is worth considering, while I have actually loved doing thermoplastic, one of the things I would consider is that it is not suitable for every situation. For example, we wouldn't put it on block paving. It's only good for tarmac as a preference, and then concrete is a substitute if you fit a primer, and but it's still not the best on concrete. It really is meant for bitumen, but never on block paving because the blocks move and it comes off in sheets and breaks. So anyway, the handout there, the paints and uses, if you just click download, that'll give you where I think each paint's best used. It's just my personal preference and what I think. By all means, you might add different paints to it and come up with your own lists as well, but that's my suggestion. Now, on that, I thought I'd just quickly give you an overview. I'm going to give you another handout in a moment for some of the equipment. The equipment that I would use on a daily basis, really, though, it comes down to a spray machine that you see here. So this is really nice and small. I can get it to the back of a van, and then we've got some hand molds and some jugs. Now, I've spoken to a lot of people about this and getting started. In fact, I'm going to give you the next handout with it. So it's this one here. If I just give you this handout here that you can download. I appreciate I'm giving you a few different handouts here, so I'll scroll back a screen. In the handout, I think you can get started in line marking for about $3,000, and that includes the training that you need as well. Now, I think really, if you're buying hand molds and some jugs, you can probably, buy them for a few £100s. The other thing I'd add is a straight edge, and I'd go for aluminium because it's easy to flex and you can break the paint off afterwards, over wood, which just soaks all the paint in. So you can get started cheaply. The caveat to that, I would say, though, is in order to do hand molding, you either need a thermoplastic system, which is rather expensive, or you need MMA 2-component, which often known as CAP, and that is very expensive to buy. So, for example, a pallet of 2-component MMA, we pay around £8,000 a pallet. So you have to translate that to sort of US, Canadian, Australian dollars, whichever one you want to use. But it's about £8,000 here for a single pallet. In comparison, when I buy acrylic or solvent-based paints, I paid just under £3,800 for a pallet, exactly the same quantity. So I would say that a hand mold is a very fast way. If you're doing 20, 30 parking spaces once or twice a week, that's the way I'd probably look at it to start with, to keep my outgoing expenditure really low. As soon as you start doing it daily, you'll find that actually you're using an awful lot of very expensive paint. And it's quite backbreaking when you're leaning over and actually, sort of pulling the hand mold along the ground. It can be quite labor intensive on you as well. So yeah, those are my sort of considerations. Now, as we were doing all of this, you can see it's obviously been a progressive journey. We started out hand molds, spray machines, moved to indoor machines, moved to thermoplastics, and there's been quite a growth sort of challenge, I would say, for our business there, because one thing we didn't have was any training support or really an idea of what to do to set the right standard. And so everybody that came into linemark.com, if you imagine, they came from different backgrounds, and so their experience was completely different. In fact, one of our guys, Lee, was a chef, John was a lorry driver. We've had people in building trades, landscaping trades. We've had one other line marker. We've had people that have come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. And the problem we have is that we want to set a really high barrier for our standards, right? So we want top quality work. The problem is we need everybody to be on the same page of how to achieve that. And really, that's where the training platform came in that we started to develop. So this is like a little insight into what we put together. So our guys, the first 5 chapters is what they will go through every year. So we've kind of divided it in 2, if you like. So everybody that comes into linemark.com goes through the exact same training of how to set out a parking bay, how to use the machine, which paints to use, how to dry, remove lines, etc., etc. And we set the standard. And we do a mix. There's text based in here, and then we incorporate an awful lot of video content within it as well. Now you'll see the first 5 chapters, I'll just go back screen. First 5 chapters are dedicated to how to do line marking. The rest of it, chapters 6 to 13, are nothing to do with how to actually install. And the reason that's so much bigger than the installation sort of parts of it is because I think when it comes to actually installing line marking itself, I can teach you in a day how to go out and mark a car park. And by the end of that day, you'll be confident to go and do it on your own. That's the easy part, in my opinion. How to actually fill your machine with paint, prime it, purge it, whatever you need to do, spray it, and a few little, you'll find niggles with each machine. So, the Titan ones I find block really frequently. And it's like little things that you do to clear the tips, how to repressurize, how to change pumps, etc. All of that, I think, is relatively simple. The same when it comes to marking out, setting out parking spaces, handicap bays, walkways. It doesn't really matter where you are in the world. It is exactly the same way you would mark it out. The only thing that changes is perhaps the dimension. So, for example, here in England, we use meters. In America, you use feet. And that's it. Ultimately, it's the same parking space. It's just in feet, not meters. And it's the same with walkways, the same with indoor lines, the same with pallet bays. There is no difference. The machinery is the same, the paint's the same, just has a different brand label on it. And so that's why the first 5 chapters, they're dedicated to how to install it, but actually that only makes up a small portion of the sort of training package really that our guys go through. The real important bit, actually, how do we win work? How do we manage our safety on site? How do we put together our quotes? How do we follow up? How do we actually get customers to pay us? How do we get higher conversions? That's the real meat of it, I would say, to be honest. And while the guys that come into linemark.com, they do the training on how to install, anybody else, if you're coming in for a sales role, even an admin role, there is a set process and system that you follow in how to do your job properly. And the reason we have that is because we want the highest sort of maximum sales volume we can get at the highest price we can get. And we need to maintain consistent quality at set standards in order to achieve that. And so all of our marketing, all of our sales processes, our emails, everything is systemized and templated. And that's essentially what is in the second part. And that makes up the biggest part of our training. And everybody at linemark.com has to go through this at least annually, where we go through, this is how we're doing this, this is how we're doing that, this is why, this is if you get stuck, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot at the back end of it there. The other thing I find makes a really big difference, right? So when it comes down to actually earning money, and a lot of people are concerned that I talk to, will it make enough money, and will it find enough customers, and will I get my investment back? That's really the sort of main three questions. And I think the problem is a lot of people don't yet necessarily appreciate what we call pre-selling and the follow-on content that's required. And what I mean by pre-selling is a lot of people that have joined me today, for example, have never met me before, never spoken to me, but perhaps you feel like you might have, or at least you've had enough trust to join me today because you've been pre-sold, in the sense that you've seen content, for example, that I've put together on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and you've gone, oh, actually, I might attend that. I might have a chat with Alex and find out what it's about. That's what we call pre-selling. And it doesn't end there. That's one form of pre-selling we have, where we introduce, for example, our training and what we do, and we bring people into a masterclass, and then we work with them on an ongoing basis. That's pre-selling from content. We do exactly the same there for our customers. And so in here, for example, this is within our quotes. Now, a lot of people I talk to, they still issue quotes on Word documents, or they might use their accounting software like QuickBooks or Xero. And it's the problem I find with that, right? It's very, very basic. There's no pre-selling. There's no self-service to it. There's no real technology integration. And I think to get ahead, to certainly stand out, you need to build more of a brand and be known for something high quality, high sort of level of standard and expectation, and therefore you can charge more money. The biggest concern I have when I talk to people is, we talk about winning customers, for example, and they go, well, I know that someone else is charging 10 quid, so I thought I'd go in at 9 quid. I'm like, oh, no. You need to go in at £12. Why on earth would you undercut them and go to 9? Because if you do that, they go to 8.50. Someone else goes to 8, someone to 7.50. And you understand you're heading back down to the bottom, and you're back into what we call the red ocean, and you need to stay in the blue ocean. Now, you can be in a blue ocean within your industry, even if other areas of it are red, because you can be really niche and specialist, or have a great reputation for quality. And that comes down to branding. And the branding doesn't end on just your YouTube videos like we do, for example. We incorporate it in our quotes. So this, for example, is actually one of our quotations. I appreciate you can't see the rest of it. It's just like a little intro to it. But we incorporate videos within our quotation that talk our customers through the project. The purpose of doing this is, if I let's say you came to me for heart surgery, and I said, okay, here's a report, that's what I'm going to do. You'd feel, okay, maybe Alex knows what he's doing, great. If I then said, by the way, here's a video that explains how I'm going to be doing your heart surgery in every step, just so you're fully aware, leaving out all the blood and bits and pieces, just an overview so you're feeling more at ease. This is what I'm going to do. Then I'm going to check this. I'm going to check this. And then I'm going to make sure that's done. And then I'm going to sew you up properly. Everything's going to be great. I mean, I'm using a bit of a grim example in that scenario. But the point is, embedding the videos shows your customer that you understand the problem better than they do. And if you can get to that position where you can demonstrate you understand something better than they do, they're more inclined to listen to you and to buy from you than a case of you going, here's a Word document with a load of stuff you don't understand. Parking bay, walkway, Where's that? Where's it going? How many of them do I actually need? And that's unfortunately what a lot of people do. I get quotes sent to me from people and they said, oh, what do you think? And I'm like, honestly, where's the pre-sale? And I think that again is a misconception, is the pre-selling happens, before they've met you. But I think you continue that journey even within your quotation. So we put, for example, videos within the quotes. We embed pictures within the quotes. We also give people options. So, for example, we offer different paints, like I mentioned. We have our thermoplastic and acrylic, but the MMA, as you know, is so much more expensive. And so instead of preempting what my customer wants and saying, well, here's my quote. I've put it all in caps, like a two-component MMA. The price is 10 grand. I might go, well, here's the price. Yes, it's 10 grand, but actually there is a cheaper option. We can save you 500 quid. And the reason we do it that way around, we let people select. So all of these are pre-selectable options. Now, the reason we do that is we do what's called anchoring. So if I came to you and said, okay, look, I've got this solution for you. It's going to cost 10 grand. It'll do everything you want. But I have got another solution. I actually think it's a very good solution still, and it will save you 5%, 10%, whatever it may be. And those are your two positions. Maybe you'll make, good money on this one. For example, with our MMAs, we don't make any more money on it at all. We charge what it costs us in addition for the project. The reason being is we want people to be able to pick either one. We anchor it at a high price, anticipating they're probably going to go for the lower or the middle, somewhere in there. And so we can say it's 10 grand, but don't worry, you can actually get it for 9.5 if you select this. Now we do this for loads of options. We do it for our working hours. You can have us at a weekend, and this is the price, and it's it's a 10-week lead. But actually, if you click this option, you can do midweek, or you can do whatever you might want to do, and you'll save £800, £1,000, whatever it is. And again, we've anchored like a really high price, and we build it back down, as opposed to trying to step people up in price. There's a couple of theories to it. You can, if you've got marginal increases. You see this on like if you're buying from Apple, right? And you go and buy a new laptop, and you go, I want the laptop. It's £1,000, and then they go, you can have another 100 gigs of memory for just £200, and you're like, okay, great. So like it's 1,200 quid, and they go, we know for £300 you can move that to a terabyte. And you're like, oh, that's a big jump of a terabyte. 300 quid, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll buy in at 1,500 quid. All of a sudden, your £1,000 purchase has jumped up incrementally, and suddenly you're paying 50% more than you had intended. And it's those nice incremental sales. The opposite way around, of course, is to high anchor and let people bring down. Now, we found that gets a bigger purchase when we do it this way around, but it's trial and error. So this is the difference, really. If you're just delivering a quote and it's a zero QuickBooks or a Word document, you can't include any of that. All you can do is put text. And in comparison, when you get a quote like this, it's just worlds apart. And again, we incorporate more videos when it comes down to the paint. So if you're unsure which paint to buy and you don't know which one, we don't just leave you there. I mean, we've obviously written, the benefits, the pros and cons, and the price that you can select. But there's also video. So, if you don't want to read the text and you're like, oh, I don't know which one to buy, click the video. This will explain it. And you go, great, we grade this one a 5 out of 5, this one a 4 out of 5. This one will be dry in 2 minutes. This will be dry in an hour. Which one would you rather do for your install? And it helps them make the decision. It's, again, pre-selling, in my opinion, because at this point, we haven't got the sale. We're just trying to get that sale. And so I think adding in and embedding this sort of content is what really, really helps get that high price sale. And ultimately, that's what you're doing this for. There's no point in competing at the bottom. So anyway, sort of bringing it all back around again, we've sort of transitioned an awful lot. So when I first started, it was just me. We expanded to quite a big team. Really, what I found out of this, though, is the one thing I love to do is the training aspect of it. So a lot of the content you'll see is me behind the scenes filming what we're up to, and then I spend my time sort of filming that and then putting together content to sort of showcase the behind the scenes, and then build upon our training platforms and deliver that one-to-one. It's one thing I really love is sort of building that business, right? It's an amazing experience, and it's something that I wish was available, I think, when I started, because it would have made things a lot cheaper for me. As I said, I spent an awful lot of money getting it wrong, and I think if I'd just had something easy, that's kind of, it would have made so much more sense. I would have grown quicker, faster, and more profitably, even for paying for something. And I think that's the reality of the way I look at things now compared to when I started. When I started, it was about cost saving. Now it's about maximizing our sort of profit on it. And I think the problem I find when you're looking at cost saving, you just want to cut price out everywhere, but really you're going to pay for it one way or another, right? So I started watching YouTube videos, and I think that's where a lot of people start. I try and produce a lot of content for people to watch as well. But you are going to ultimately pay for training. You pay for it in two ways. Either you pay for it in cash or you pay for it in time. The most expensive way is to pay for it in time. Now, the reason people watch the YouTube videos is they can get some information, but not everything. For example, we show behind the scenes. We don't show you how we build the business. Like installing the line marking part's the easy bit. How you make that repeatable and actually grow your company, that's the tricky bit that we don't show on the YouTube videos. And so really that's kind of where my role has changed. Like it's just line marking and training really. And the training side for me goes more into like the coaching as well, like how you build your business. So I spend a lot of my time coaching our guys and then building our company, but also helping other companies build theirs as well. Now, arguably, yes, it creates some more competition. I'm okay with it because I absolutely love what I do though, and I love working with other businesses on it. So it satisfies a lot of needs there. Now, as I was saying about paying for it, either people pay for it in monetary terms and they hand over some money, they do some training and they go, great, I'm sorted. I can get started today or within a week and my business is up and running. Or more commonly, people spend 6 to 12 months, sometimes longer, watching videos, waiting for the next episodes to come out and hoping they'll learn something new. And what they're doing is paying for it in time. And eventually they've got two choices. Either they're going to take action, start their business, and still going to need some form of training, or make loads of mistakes, or they're not going to take action. And I think people broadly fall into those sort of categories, and then the subcategory of I'll take action or I won't take action. And if they take action, great. It usually takes time. The problem with that though, the longer it takes, the more saturated a market becomes, the more people that join ahead and the less work they bring in. I sat on the fence, I know, for a long time, and I wasn't sure, and I watched YouTube videos, and now I look at it and go, okay, so we've made a couple of £1 million back now. Had I still been watching YouTube videos, I would have been a couple of £1 million worse off. And I think, well, what if I'd done that 5 years prior? It would have been an awful lot better. So hindsight's great in that respect, but really that's that's all we sort of offer now is the installation for people, but actually an awful lot of my time now is just spent helping people, training and sort of coaching. Now, talking about the pricing, I appreciate, sorry, I am going on fairly quickly. I've got a handout to give you in just a moment as well. So I've got a couple of slides to show you. I think there's 3 on here, and then I will give you the pricing calculator. This is essentially the pricing calculator, and it's a really, really important tool. So what you've got, left-hand side, top 4 products, these are all line marking paints. So for example, you've got hand applicable MMA, spray applicable MMA, thermoplastic and solvent. The bottom ones, they're all indoor line marking products, so we're not going to touch on those in this session, but that's essentially what they are. Now, what I've done is I work out what I pay per linear meter. Now, the way once you get the download, there's a small box you can edit just here that gives you the instructions on how I've done it. But essentially, you'll buy paint, let's say in a pail or a tin, whatever you want to call it, and it would come in a quantity, 25 kilos, 25 liters, etc. And normally it will have a coverage, and it will say 25 kilos covers, let's say 100 square meters, whatever it might be. And then you can go, okay, I know what I paid for the tin. I know it's going to cover 100 square meters. What I do is divide that by 10 and go, okay, I'm going to get 1,000 linear meters at 10 centimeters wide. That gives me a price per linear meter. Now, I appreciate, in North America, for example, you're going to use feet. It doesn't make a difference whether it's feet or meters. The point is you need to know how much per foot or how much per linear meter it costs you to do something. Now, I know some people work out in square meters, but the only thing I sell in square meters is an infield walkway, like a green walkway. That's the only thing I can think of that I actually sell in square meterage. Everything else is linear meter, and that's why I put it as linear meter. You can just change meter for foot. It really doesn't make a difference. It's just whatever you want to call it. It's the price per unit. So essentially what I do, if I were to do a 10-meter line, so let's say here in the UK, a parking space is 5 meters long. We're going to do 2 of those, so it's 10 linear meters, like one back to back. If I were to spray that line in solvent spray, it would cost me £3.33. I would give it a 3 out of 5 in terms of durability. It's good for concrete, good for tarmac. You don't need anything else with it. It's just the spray. If, however, I was going to do that in thermoplastic, I would say it's going to cost £4 for that same 10 meters. Durability is increased about 4 out of 5. Best for tarmac, not really for concrete and blocks as much. But I do include the gas cost in there as well. It will cost me 67 pence more than the solvent spray. So you can see that this calculator compares the different products. If, however, I was going to do that in hand applicable MMA, that same 10 meters will actually cost me £8.50. Now, it is more durable and it's really good for concrete and tarmac. I also include the peroxide with it, the sachet that you mix in. But the cost difference between the solvent spray and the hand applicable MMA is £5.17. Now, on a 10-meter line, it's going to cost me £5.17 more than the solvent spray. This is really important because sometimes people ask you about discounting, and I can think of 2 occasions where somebody's asked me to do jobs for less. Two occasions I've accepted where people have asked me to do it for less, and I've said yes. Every single time I've come to regret it. Either I'm not charging enough money and therefore I'm not as engaged, or it's just not worth the hassle because people then expect more. You end up undercutting the price. And they've said, for example, it was quite a big job. It was about 20 grand. And somebody said, Alex, can you do this job for 15? And I went, well, look, you've handed it to me on a plate. I haven't really got to do much. I can bang it in a week or two. Yeah, fine. I'll fit it in a couple of weeks' time. I've got a spare space for a few days. I'll put it in for you. And then when you get there, it's like, oh, actually, I need extras here. I need this. I need that. Oh, by the way, is this not 2-component that you're using? You're thinking, Jesus, I've already discounted this massively, and now you're asking for extras on top, and that infuriates me. And I had another one where they've done exactly the same. They said, look, we had a price of X, and this is a company that a competitor here in the UK that I've got, and I got sent this price, and they said, Alex, this is the price these guys have given us, but we want to pick you. I said, great. Well, you've got my price as well. Mine's more money, obviously, at this point. I can see both our prices. There's about 500 quid in it. It wasn't masses. And they said, no, look, this is to a school. And they said, look, we are going to have to go with the cheapest. There's nothing I can do. That's what the school bus will go with. Can you do it for less money? And I said, fine. I'll cut the 500 quid off. I'll do it for you. And I did it. And again, same thing. It was just, why on earth did I do it just to win it and discount it? Now, one of the key things I didn't necessarily use was something like this that tells me what it actually costs me. So the next page on here, there's one more to show you on this as well. The next page on here, this is all the items we sell down the side. In addition to the items that we sell, what I've put on here is you've then got the quantity required, what it costs me in this column. You've got the total charge to the customer, and then you can pick your paint. So, for example, if I were going to do, in this example, I've put tennis court overmark, and I've said it's £197. My customer has asked for 5 of them, and so it's £1,000 charge. Now, what I've done on this column here, you need to change this back to a 1 because it's currently doing 10. It should be 1. I've given you just that for the example. So it said to me, okay, the price it's going to cost me then if I pick them